Mikhail Gorbachev was one of the most important political leaders of the 20th century. He was the last leader of the Soviet Union, a huge country that existed from 1922 to 1991. Gorbachev is remembered for trying to change the Soviet system through peaceful reforms. His ideas helped end the Cold War, reduce the danger of nuclear war, and allowed many countries in Eastern Europe to become free. At the same time, his reforms led to the collapse of the Soviet Union itself. Because of this, people around the world have very different opinions about him. Some see him as a hero, while others blame him for the fall of a superpower. Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev was born on March 2, 1931, in a small village called Privolnoye in southern Russia. At that time, Russia was part of the Soviet Union under the rule of Joseph Stalin. Gorbachev was born into a poor farming family. His parents and grandparents worked hard on collective farms, which were farms controlled by the state. Life was not easy. Food was limited, and people lived under strict government control. As a child, Gorbachev experienced hunger, fear, and uncertainty, especially during World War II, when Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. World War II had a strong effect on young Gorbachev. His father went to fight in the war, and the village suffered from shortages of food and supplies. Many people died or were injured. These early experiences helped shape Gorbachev's thinking. He learned how dangerous war could be and how much ordinary people suffered because of political decisions. This later influenced his strong desire for peace and cooperation between nations. Gorbachev was a bright and hardworking student. He did very well in school and showed strong leadership skills. Because of his academic success, he was accepted into Moscow State University, one of the best universities in the Soviet Union. He studied law there. Moving from a small village to the capital city was a big change for him. At the university, he met people from different parts of the country and was exposed to new ideas. This broadened his understanding of society and politics. While studying at university, Gorbachev joined the Communist Party, which was the only political party allowed in the Soviet Union. Joining the party was necessary for anyone who wanted a career in government or public life. Gorbachev believed in socialism and the idea that society should be fair and equal. However, he also began to notice problems in the system, such as corruption, inefficiency, and lack of freedom. After graduating from university, Gorbachev returned to his home region and began working for the Communist Party. He slowly moved up the party ranks. He was known as an energetic, intelligent, and honest official. Unlike many others, he listened to ordinary people and tried to solve their problems. This helped him gain respect and support. Over the years, he held many important positions in regional and national government. In the 1970s, Gorbachev moved to Moscow and became part of the central leadership of the Communist Party. At this time, the Soviet Union was facing serious problems. The economy was weak and growing very slowly. Factories were outdated, agriculture was inefficient, and people often faced shortages of basic goods. The government spent huge amounts of money on the military and the arms race with the United States. At the same time, the political system was rigid and resistant to change. The Soviet Union was ruled by a series of elderly leaders in the late 1970s and early 1980s. They were cautious and unwilling to make major reforms. Many people felt that the country was stuck and moving nowhere. When these leaders died one after another, it became clear that the system needed fresh leadership. In 1985, at the age of 54, Mikhail Gorbachev was chosen as General Secretary of the Communist Party. This made him the most powerful person in the Soviet Union. Gorbachev became leader at a critical time. He believed that the Soviet Union could not continue in the same way. He saw that the economy was failing and that people were losing faith in the system. Gorbachev believed that socialism could be saved, but only through serious reform. He did not want to destroy the Soviet Union. Instead, he wanted to modernize it and make it more humane and effective. Soon after becoming leader, Gorbachev introduced two major policies that became famous around the world. The first was called Perestroika, which means restructuring. The goal of Perestroika was to reform the Soviet economy. Gorbachev wanted to reduce strict government control and allow more freedom for factories, farms, and businesses. He believed that giving people more responsibility would improve productivity and innovation. The second major policy was called Glasnost, which means openness. Glasnost was about political and social freedom. Under this policy, people were allowed to speak more freely, criticize the government, and discuss problems openly. Newspapers and television were given more freedom to report the truth. For the first time in many years, people could openly talk about past crimes, such as the harsh rule of Stalin. Glasnost changed Soviet society deeply. People began to discuss history, politics, and social issues openly. Many were shocked to learn about the suffering that had been hidden for decades. While this openness was exciting for some, it was frightening for others. The government was no longer able to control public opinion as it had before. Nationalist movements grew stronger in different parts of the Soviet Union, as people demanded more rights and independence. Perestroika, meanwhile, faced many difficulties. Changing a large and complex economy was not easy. The reforms were slow and sometimes confusing. Old systems were weakened, but new ones were not fully developed. As a result, the economy became unstable. Shortages of food and goods became worse in some areas. Many people became frustrated and blamed Gorbachev for the economic problems. In foreign policy, Gorbachev made dramatic changes. He believed that the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States was dangerous and unnecessary. The Cold War was a long period of tension, fear, and competition, especially involving nuclear weapons. Gorbachev wanted to reduce this tension and focus on improving life at home instead of competing militarily with the West. Gorbachev met with U.S. President Ronald Reagan several times. Although the two leaders had different political views, they developed mutual respect. Together, they signed important agreements to reduce nuclear weapons. One major agreement was the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which eliminated an entire class of nuclear missiles. This was a historic step toward reducing the risk of nuclear war. Gorbachev also changed Soviet policy toward Eastern Europe. For many years, the Soviet Union had controlled countries like Poland, East Germany, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia through military force and political pressure. In the past, attempts at reform in these countries had been crushed by Soviet tanks. Gorbachev decided not to use force anymore. He believed that each country should choose its own path. This decision had huge consequences. In 1989, communist governments across Eastern Europe began to fall, mostly without violence. One of the most important events was the fall of the Berlin Wall, which had divided East and West Germany for decades. The wall came down peacefully, and Germany was later reunited. Gorbachev did not try to stop these changes, earning him praise around the world. While Gorbachev was admired internationally, his position at home became weaker. Many hardline communists believed he was destroying the Soviet system. At the same time, reformers felt he was not moving fast enough. Nationalist movements in Soviet republics like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Ukraine, and Georgia grew stronger. These regions wanted more independence or complete separation from the Soviet Union. In 1990, Gorbachev was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Committee praised him for his role in ending the Cold War and promoting peaceful change. This award made him even more famous internationally. However, inside the Soviet Union, problems continued to grow. The economy was in crisis, and political conflicts increased. In August 1991, a group of hardline officials attempted a coup against Gorbachev. They wanted to stop his reforms and restore strict communist rule. Gorbachev was placed under house arrest while the coup leaders tried to take control. However, the coup failed after massive public protests and resistance, led by Russian leader Boris Yeltsin. Although Gorbachev returned to power after the failed coup, his authority was badly damaged. The Communist Party was banned, and the Soviet republics moved quickly toward independence. One by one, they declared that they were leaving the Soviet Union. Gorbachev tried to save the country by proposing a new union with more freedom for the republics, but it was too late. In December 1991, the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus agreed to dissolve the Soviet Union. On December 25, 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev resigned as president. The Soviet Union officially ceased to exist. A few days later, it was replaced by independent countries, with Russia as the largest successor state. After leaving office, Gorbachev lived as a private citizen. He remained active in public life, writing books, giving speeches, and supporting various foundations. He continued to promote peace, democracy, and environmental protection. However, his influence seemed more greater abroad than in Russia. Many Russians blamed him for the economic hardships of the 1990s and the loss of the Soviet Union status as a superpower. Gorbachev's legacy is complex and debated. In the West, he is often seen as a brave and wise leader who helped end a dangerous period in world history without violence. In Russia, opinions are more divided. Some see him as a reformer who tried to do the right thing, while others see him as a weak leader who allowed the country to collapse. What is clear is that Mikhail Gorbachev changed the course of history. He showed that dialogue could replace confrontation and that peaceful reform was possible, even in a rigid system. He took great personal and political risks to follow his beliefs. Whether loved or criticized, Gorbachev remains one of the most important figures of modern history. Mikhail Gorbachev died on August 30, 2022, at the age of 91. His death marked the end of an era. He lived a long life shaped by some of the most dramatic events of the 20th century. Today, historians continue to study his decisions and their impact. His story teaches us about the difficulty of change, the power of ideas, and the deep connection between leadership and the fate of nations.